Here we go. Are you ready? You sure? Okay, because today's going to be kind of wild. I'm just telling you, okay, because we're going to talk about getting stuck. See, here's the thing. These little earbud things that we wear for our monitors on stage, the one that I've got, for some reason, it likes to pull off on this side. And so when I get up from the drum center, I take that thing off, I go boop, and I pop the little thing off, and even though the ear thing comes off, the little ear buddy part stays right there. And I have to tell you, every single week, there's a little bit of panic in my world that goes, is it ever going to come out? Is I going to push it back in too far? Are they going to have to take me to the doctor? They're going to use like the alligators of life and save me. You know, it's one of those things. There's just a moment, a brief moment, where I think that I've gotten stuck like 3 times in my life that I can remember very easily. See, I lived in Michigan. We lived in Michigan for 14 years. That's where I grew up. And the house we lived in backed up to a forest, and about a mile through the forest, there was a swamp that was between us and the school that had the best playground in town. So guess where we wanted to go? We were not allowed to walk on Kibbe Road, which was the killer road, which is what my parents always told me. You walk on Kibbe Road, you'll get killed. You walk on Kibbe Road, you'll get killed. I want you to know that I've walked Kibbe Road, I've not died. Sorry, Mom. But anyway, Kibbe Road was, the cars did drive fast on it, I get that. So our answer to that was, we would walk out the back door, we'd walk across our property, we'd go through the woods, and we'd get down to the swamp, and in the summer, we knew where to step. In the places you couldn't step, we had boards thrown out, so you could walk across the boards, because I was younger and much more agile in that point of my life. I would walk across the boards, and I would get there, and we would go to the playground, we would play, and then we would reverse the process to go home. But in the winter, it was easy, because the big pond in the swamp froze. So you could go through the forest, down the hill, you get to the swamp, you look at it, and you go, woohoo! And you jump out on the ice, and you run across the ice, and you go into the playground. Seems simple, right? As long as you don't get in such a big hurry that you forget the simple rules of ice. One of which is, if there are reeds growing through it, don't step there. Well, we'd been sledding that day down the big hill, and our dad was with us, and I was like, Dad, I'm going to the playground. He's like, okay, because he'd sent us to the playground enough times. He knew we knew how to get there. And I go running across the ice. I'm ready to play. Let's go, baby. I'm there. And I'm running across the ice, and I wasn't thinking, and I hit the patch with reeds. And I disappeared. Not all the way through this time, thank God, but to about here. Now, something else you need to know is the mud in Michigan is black. There is nothing nice about it. There is nothing. In the summer, if you hit the mud, you get leeches, period. And I don't want to know what else has probably crawled all over my body from being in the mud in Michigan, okay? Don't tell me. I don't want to know. But I'm running. I hit this spot with reeds. I go through the ice. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, help, Dad, help. And my dad walks over, and he gets down on his belly. He reaches out, grabs my hand, pulls me. I break a bunch of ice coming out. We finally get to the solid stuff. He pulls me up on the ice, and I stand up, and I am from here down. Gross is an understatement of the year. I am nasty. I am just nasty to beat the band. I am Janet Jackson nasty boy. You know, I'm just that guy at that point. Black mud all over me. It's just gross. And my dad is standing in front of me. And all I can think, I can smell it right now talking about it. I can smell the swamp mud. It's nasty. And my dad is standing in front of me, and I'm standing there trying to think of something to tell him, and all I can think is, how did I get stuck in the mud in the winter? But see, he used to take us out on the big lakes too. We went up and we vacationed at Traverse City at a place called Big Glen Lake. Big Glen's right out there by Lake Michigan, and so when they say it's like one of the smaller lakes up there, what they mean is if you combine most of the lakes you have around here, that's about the size lake you've got. It's big. You can go out in the middle and you can't see one of the shores easily. Our dad would take us out there. Where's Bob Reiners? You ready, Bob? Going to talk about a sailboat. okay? My dad would take us out on our little sunfish. Now, if you don't know what a sunfish is, it's a canoe with a mast. That is essentially what a sunfish is. My dad would take us out in a sunfish, and he'd take us out each by ourselves, and he wanted us to be prepared if anything happened. So he would dump the boat in the middle of the lake. Now, not like rock it so you'd be a little scared. No, no, no. We are going all the way over, keel standing straight up in the air, dump the boat over. And my job was to get up on top of the boat, grab the keel, and try and flip the boat back over. That's how you do it. Right, Bob? Bob gives me a yes. My resident sailor says, yes, that's how you do it. Now, you need to bear in mind, I looked a lot like my son did. I was maybe 70 pounds when I was 9 years old. And I did everything. He dumped it. I got under the boat like you're supposed to make sure you have a spot to breathe. And then you go back out from under the boat and you get up on top of the boat. But at 9 years old, I wasn't that big. And so just getting my foot up high enough to grab a toe, not a foot, a toe on the lip that's about this big around the edge of that sailboat, monkey climb it up onto the back, onto the bottom of the boat, and grab the keel, and my whole 70-year-old self grabbed that keel, put his feet on the boat, and went, ah! And the boat went, bloop. And my dad, who loves me dearly, looks at me and goes, you need help? And I turned around and looked at my dad, and I said, no. Because I'm 9. Guess what I do? I grab the keel again. I mean, you can hear me screaming in Lake Michigan. The big boats, the freighters out there going by can hear me. They think it's some kind of foghorn going off somewhere, okay? I am grunting and screaming, and he keeps going, all you have to do is ask and I'll help you. No, I can do it myself. Like this. I did it for so long that I literally fell off the boat, and I'm laying in the water, looking at the keel, going, I can still do it. Like my arms and my legs are just like this. Then my dad goes, you need help? No, I can still do it. He snickered a little because I'm 9. He gets up on the boat, he puts one foot on the back on the rail, grabs the keel, leans over, and the whole thing goes whoosh, and pops right over. He said, okay, just float there for a few minutes. He stood the mast up. He got the sail ready. He made sure the rudder was good to go. He made sure everything was ready for me. And then he reached down in the water where I was stuck because I couldn't move anymore. He picked me up and he put me in the cockpit and he said, it's okay, just dry off. My grandpa had a barn. He had a lot of cattle, and so he had a barn, and he did square bales. He would take his square bales, and he would go into this barn, and he would stack them up. And I mean, it was as tall, at least, as our rail on the side over here. We would have hay stacked that tall, easily. He would do 10, 12 bales at least high. And of course, us being kids, what did we do? When we went there with my cousins, we would go run out, and we would climb up on top and walk the rafters and climb the ropes down and swing off it and see how high you could fly onto the other piles of hay. I mean, it's amazing I survived. But one time I didn't think I was going to be able to because my cousins, they were like, watch this. And they slid down between a set of bales. And they were like, oh, help me, help me, help me. And one cousin would reach down and grab him and just pull him back out like it was nothing. And I was like, oh, that's cool, I can do that. So I walk over to a part of the bales, and I slide down between. Little did I know that my cousins had found a spot where the bale was pushed over a little bit, so you could get your foot on it and push off while the other person was helping lift you out. They went down about 4 bales. I went down about 12. I got into a crack in the bales where I couldn't turn my legs, I couldn't bend my knees, I couldn't move my arms either way. I was basically stuck like this. You ever been stuck like that anywhere? It's not pleasant. And so I start screaming because that's the obvious choice. Help! And I hear my dad go, what's going on? And I hear my cousins and my brother run for the hills. Help! And my dad goes, how? What? How? What? But, I'm like, can we just get me out? Well, why did you do it? Because it's Grandpa's barn. I can do what I want in Grandpa's barn. I'm telling him this from 12 bales down, like I'm in charge. He goes, okay, hang on. He went and grabbed a barn rope, took it over, passed it down to me. I grabbed onto it like this. He pulled up. I had hay sticking out of every orifice that was exposed. I get to the top. He lays me over on the bale. We get down off the top of the bales, and we sit at the bales at the bottom. I was stuck. Do you ever feel stuck right now? I mean, really, do you ever feel stuck? One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, and I've probably preached out it before, but I'm going to preach out it again now, and I'm probably going to preach out it again later too, is Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me up out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. I want you to know something. I got stuck in the mud because I was in a hurry. And I didn't pay attention to what my dad had taught me my entire life. And you know what? That was scary. I got stuck on the boat because I was too prideful, too arrogant, and not smart enough to look at my dad and go, yes, I need help. And I got stuck in the barn because I thought it was my grandpa's barn and I could do whatever the heck I wanted, and you can just kiss off if you don't think that's right. I want you to tell you something. My dad never got me stuck anywhere. But by not listening to him, I dang sure got myself stuck in a lot of places. How you doing listening to God? Particularly if you answered yes to feeling stuck. Because I feel stuck a lot. Here of late, I've felt very stuck. And I want you to know that's scary to me, because sometimes you get stuck and you're not sure why, you're not sure how to get out of it. You're not sure what the next thing is going to actually be that you even get to do. Because we don't pay attention to the Father. And we get in a hurry. And we get proud. And we act entitled. And we get stuck. I have been in the muck and mire so many times and so often, and I can tell you that all I ever have done is cry out to God. I pray to Him. I try to get Him to come back to me. I try to get to Him. I try to do whatever I can, and I often forget that when I'm stuck, I can't go anywhere. No matter how it may seem to me, I cannot go anywhere when I am stuck. The Father always has to come to me. That's why I like my dad. My dad was patient with me, but when it was time to hurry, he hurried. When I went through that ice, he was there in a heartbeat. To my memory, he was there in a heartbeat. He was ready to do everything and anything it was going to take to save me. When I was out in that lake, my dad never left me, even though it felt like I was all alone on the side of that boat. He simply floated in the water, looking at me going, "Are you ready for help yet? Are you ready for me to help?" And the whole time he was there, I kept saying, "No, I can do it myself." And when my dad walked into the barn, he already knew the plan. And even in my arrogance and even in my defiance, he still met my need. Even though I was stuck in all three. You see, we have to remember that we cannot get to the Father, but that He will run to us. Isn't that kind of the point of the parable in Luke 15? If you look in Luke 15:15, it says, "So he went Now, if you don't know this story, it's the prodigal son. Everybody pretty much knows it, but let me give you the backstory. The kid knew he had a rich dad. He wanted to go spend his dad's money, so he said, Dad, I want your money, which basically in that culture means, I wish you were dead. The father, being a wise and loving father, gives him half of his property, and the son goes out and he begins to spend it with his friends and everything, and ends up spending it all so that he ends up in dire straits. He ends up destitute. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. I want you to remember, the prodigal son was a Jew. You could not find a dirtier, nastier, culturally more obscene job than feeding pigs. Sent him out to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. This kid is stuck. Now, I've been around pig farms. I can tell you he was probably stuck literally often. Because pig farms are basically mud mixed with pig poo. Okay? That is not kung fu for pigs. That is pig poo as in poopy. And you get out there and you try to walk, and you better make sure your boots are tied on pretty tight or work pretty well, because you take one step out and you hear and it's easy to get stuck in that kind of a position. But this kid was stuck in more ways than just this. This kid was stuck in such a way that he was stuck between what he wanted to do, his pride, his arrogance, his impatience, and knowing that he has a father at home who loves him so much that he said, I'll do it for you even though you said you want me dead. Look at the son's response as he goes further down. He's stuck. But he knows his dad is still there. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. Again, he's still trying to do it on his own. Do you realize that? Even in this desperation, he's like, and I do this all the time, so I'm not like out of the realm of understanding where this kid's at. But he's playing out how future's going to go in his own head, and he thinks he knows exactly what's going to happen, so he's prepping himself to think and be his father and give his father the answer before his father even responds. Do you see it? He hasn't unstuck himself yet. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. First smart thing that kid said the whole time. Or is it? The kid doesn't get to judge who's worthy. He blew everything. He has nothing, and he is stuck. The person that pulls you out is the one that gets to judge who's worthy and who's not. But the father said to the servants, Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. His feet were stuck, and I will lift him up and put him on the rock. I want to be the prodigal son. Not because of everything he gets, but because he finally got smart enough to just let God do his thing. And I'm oftentimes not. I want to do God's will. I want to be with God. I want to do whatever he wants me to do. I want to be pliable, and I want him to work in me. And the problem is, I am an iron rod. And I'm stuck. I need the Father to run to me. See, the best part about my dad was this. He pulled me out of the mud. We walked across the pond. We walked back up the hill to the forest behind our house. We walked through the forest. We got to the house, and we went in the garage because there was no way my mom was having that in the house. And my dad didn't say anything. And the whole walk back, all I could think is, oh man, they just bought me these new boots. They're ruined. Oh, I only got these snow pants like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Oh, my coat is wrecked. Mom's not even going to be able to get this stuff out of it. And I've got my JCPenney jeans on. Not my Kmart jeans. I got my JCPenney jeans on. Now, for those of you that are a little younger, you aren't going to understand this. But for those of you that are a little older, you should know, if you wanted nice clothes, where'd you go? JCPenney. I'm thinking about all this stuff that I'm wearing that is ruined, all this stuff that I have messed up. And when we got home, my dad turned around and he was almost in tears and looked at me and thought, if you'd have gone, he told me this, he said, if you'd have gone under the ice, I don't know if I'd have been able to break it or get to you. I'm so glad I was able to pull you out. And he gave me a hug and he helped me get rid of all the clothes that I had on. He took me in, he cleaned me up, and he put me to bed. See, I was only worried about what happened on the outside. I wasn't just stuck in the mud. I was stuck in what I was wearing. I was stuck in the outside. But my dad looked at me as his son on the inside. It didn't matter how big a wreck I was on the outside. He loved the inside part of me. He pulled the mast up. He's got the sail going. I was in the cockpit of the Sunfish. And he asked me which way I thought we should go, and I told him, and he talked to me about a bunch of things, and I thought that was great. And he let me get up on the side so I could get a little more sun, and he let me warm up, and he let me dry off. And then he said, okay, it's your turn, take the rudder. What? He said, you can find our way home. Just take the rudder. You see, my dad didn't hold it against me that I was so arrogant at 9 years old and 70 pounds that I thought I could flip an entire boat back over. He didn't hold it against me that I left him in the water for like half an hour, 45 minutes, me trying to flip this boat back over. He didn't hold it against me that I was so arrogant that I would not accept his help even after he offered it. But when we got back in the boat, my dad looked at me and he said, you did good. Here's a little more, try this. I was stuck in arrogance, and the humility of my father allowed him to look at me and say, you're okay, you can do more. Sometimes it's hard after we get stuck, but after we do, God knows who we are then, and he will sometimes look at us and say, it's okay, you can do more. My dad and I sat on a bale of hay at the bottom of that stack. And he explained something to me. He said, I know it's your grandpa's barn. I know it's your grandpa's hay. I know you guys play in here all the time. He said, I know what you do and I know who you are. But you need to remember this. All of this only happens because of God. So remember whose you are and who gave us all this. We get a little entitled in our salvation sometimes. We get a little entitled in our situation sometimes. We get a little entitled with our seat sometimes in church, don't we? My favorite is when somebody's sitting in somebody else's seat, but they're not going to tell them, but they come in. So there's somebody who normally sits right here, there's somebody already there, and my favorite is this, when I watch them walk in and they go, they'll walk this way a little, but never take their eyes off the person. Tell me we're not entitled to our own seat? If we're that entitled to where our butts sit on Sunday morning, How much more dangerous is it if we become entitled to the things of Christ, entitled to the things that we do in church, entitled to the stuff that is not ours to be entitled to, but instead is supposed to glorify God, and we use it to glorify ourselves too often? Because we are stuck in an entitlement we don't even understand exists. I think it would be really good if we could all have a sit down with God. And he could look at us and go, you know, I gave this whole world to my son. I put everything under his feet. And he loves it when you play in his world. He loves it when you do great things in his world. But you need to remember this. It's his world, not yours. It's really, really dangerous to get stuck. It's really, really dangerous to get on something that can shift. We watch a guy on YouTube called Mark Rober. If you've ever watched him, he's very interesting. He's a scientist. He used to work for NASA. Now he does YouTube and makes more money. Who knew? One of the best experiments he does, he fills an entire hot tub with sand. And he has his nieces and nephews go out there and walk on it, and you can see it's solid, and they're walking all over it. But what they don't know is he put a bunch of aerators underneath the sand in the hot tub. And so while his nieces and nephews are out there walking around on it, he flips a switch, and it blows a bunch of air up through the sand. Now, I have a question for my scientists out there. Do you know what happens when you push a bunch of air up through sand? It becomes water, basically. When you aerate sand, it becomes as loose as water. And so these nieces and nephews are out there walking around, and they're on top of the sand, and then he flips that button, and all of a sudden, they all drop to here in the hot tub, and he turns it off, and it locks them in place. Because once the air goes away, the sand compacts back to the density it was before. So they hit the floor, they're like this, and they are basically locked in place because they can't move from the amount of sand that is holding them in place. And then he flips it back on, and they all go to the side and climb out. He shuts it off, and of course they all go, "Can we do it again?" It's scary how easy it is to get stuck, and how easy it is to get stuck in stuff that we really aren't even aware we're getting stuck in until it's too late. I think Jesus tries to warn us of that a little bit when he talks about where to build. I love that Jesus is the master of physics, because sometimes I look at his parables and I think, man, Jesus knew what could do with that. That's just crazy. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. It's worse when everything's destroyed because you just can't get unstuck. I pray that we would listen to the words of God. I pray that we would be wise enough to hear our Father who is constantly with us going, "I'm here, let me help you." Constantly with the Father who pulls us out and goes, "It doesn't matter about all this stuff that you've messed up." Has anybody here ever messed anything up? I mean, I know there are a few perfect people in here. And when you go before God, do you ever have this feeling of just, how do I even do that because I'm so messed up? He doesn't care what the mud on you is. He doesn't care how badly you've wrecked the things he's given you. He sees you, not the outside. when we begin to recognize that, when we begin to hear him offering us help, and when we finally realize it's his world, not our world, so we need to remember who we're supposed to glorify through all our actions. Maybe we're ready to flip back to Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me up out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock, and he gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. The invitation today is very simple. I mean, super simple. If you're stuck, it's time to listen to the Father. If you feel stuck today, all I want you to do during invitation is I want you to pray to God. And not that he would unstuck you. That's a tricky part, okay? I don't want him to unstuck you. I want you to hear him. Pray that his voice would be evident in your life to you. Pray that there would be nothing hidden from him so that he can point it out to you and that you will be willing to hear it. Pray all glory and honor and power to him. Now, if you don't feel stuck right now, pray for the people around you, because I bet one of them does. That's your invitation today. Would you stand as we pray?